Okay, watch out. I've left the swears in this one, so there may be some F-bombs. Sorry. Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast about stuff in the universe and talking and thinking about stuff and being so clever. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic. And this week we're going to be talking about Meaning Conference. Because I went to Meaning yesterday and I've got a very detailed and well thought through report.
That's good. Is it that time already? So technically this is an anniversary podcast, but
it is.
This is what, 102? So we missed one. So we're not on quite the fifth. It should be like 104, shouldn't it? But no, we missed two. So that's fine. That means 100 was a good one, and I've already started season 3 on the listing for 101. So this is just a roundup of the daily. What is it, like a little reboot session? Meaning, because you weren't going to go, but how did you end up going?
I tweeted because I saw they did a thing out to say, you can have if you do a multi-buy. So I said, anyone want to go with me?
When?
Like last week.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
So they had some left, so you just went. But okay.
So somebody got me.
I didn't see that tweet. I don't really look at Twitter.
I'm always on the Twitters. So I brought, as per usual, that encouraged into people who'd like one person that I haven't seen. I used to work with, haven't seen for about 5 years, we worked out. She had signed off for some underlings to go. And then when I tweeted, she was like, oh, maybe I should go. So she came, she'd never been before. 2 of my friends from Liverpool that I used to work with. So I had a nice, it's just nice. I was trying to take a newbie, if I can.
Okay.
And it's 10 minutes walk from my house. So it'd be rude not
nice.
to.
Yeah.
The dog's really going for it now.
It's just Michael and Ivanka's motorbike and dog podcast. All right, well, let's play music. How's it going, Ivanka?
It is going well. I'm enjoying myself in Brighton. I am seeing lots of people that I like and that I haven't seen. I made some delicious granola.
Okay, what's that involve? Toasting some oats?
Toasting some oats. Actually, no, it was a 1-to-5 ratio with 1 oats and the rest nuts and seeds.
Ooh.
It was most fancy. It was very nice. And I baked it very, very slowly. Normally I just whack it in 10 minutes, toast it a bit bosh. But this was more of a gentle, lower heat, slow thing that I read in some gut book, because I've obviously, now that you've recommended the gut thing, it's now become an obsession of reading as much as possible. Because that's how I roll. And so, yes, I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
How are you,
Glad to hear
Michael?
it. I'm going to try and bosh through my back. I've got this backlog of things to talk about. I'm going to bosh through half of them. I wanted to say that that 4.5 hour What's Going On in Twin Peaks video, I wanted to bring that up in relation to your father's policy on violence and stuff that you watched. Like, it's okay if it's historical. Like, I think they're on a similar page, because I think what it's about Lynch's problem with television, that murder and violence have become commodified and have no consequences, and it's victim of the weak, and there's never really there's a lot of these crime things in the 90s where, and still are obviously, but where people are getting killed, and that's not really dealt with. It's just and here's the detectives and and so it's and he sort of considers that a poison in society, and that if violence is going to be shown, it should count. And it's part of life, so it's you've got to show the intensity of these things, and then the sort of villain, the evil Bob, sort of represents TV's TV's sort of corrupt way of dealing with things like that, and just sort of doing it for fun. Like violence for fun is kind of like what the bad character in that is sort of driven by, and then you look at all the surreal dialogue, and it sort of makes sense in when interpreted as a meta narrative on television. It sort of starts to make sense. Like even the point he goes, look, the floor has got like the zigzag parquet, whatever pattern on it.
Yeah.
Like that classic thing. He's like, this represents radio waves through which TV is broadcast. And I was like, come on. And I was like, yeah, I guess it does. And like that room is like the TV station, and all the characters in there sort of represent the sort of different conflicting interests of TV executives and things like that. So you can sort of see like a lot of good things. Like it's by being sort of self-referential, it can be a lot deeper. I think a lot of art does well to do that. I'll tell you finally for this week. I'll tell you my. Sorry, I'll let you respond if you have anything to say.
No, I just think I don't really know what to say.
No, well, I'm just going to talk at you about that because I thought it was interesting. I just think it's interesting. So
I might have a response in a couple of weeks.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Finally, I told you about this already, but like I really came a cropper of the Amazon cloud computing service when I was doing my bills yesterday. I was like, what's this £300 charge from Amazon? I don't remember buying any gadgets from Amazon. And then I look and it's AWS, Amazon Web Services. So a few weeks ago, I was doing some neural networks, artificial intelligence sort of explorations, and it was a bit slow on my own computer. So I thought I'd rent some cloud hosting space on Amazon and sort of like even put in a request for the supercharged one. And so I was doing stuff on there. And then when I went home that day, I sort of clicked the terminate instance because it's kind of they charge you a lot by the hour, and then sort of forgot about it, and then sort of went in to look at it the next afternoon and realised that I'd left this thing on overnight, so for like 38 hours basically, and
that was £300.
I hadn't quite registered it was going to be like 300 quid, so I've contacted them and said, please have mercy. Like, I think there's a bit of blame on your side as well, in that like it wasn't obvious that it hadn't turned itself off, even though I'd definitely clicked the button, but then I'd found, oh God, I can't remember if it was a confirmation dialogue or if it was like the request had failed or something, and I hadn't double checked it, which obviously like after that I was double checking it really hard, but I'm hoping I get my 300 quid back. It's not like Jeff can't afford it. What did he say it was worth? 140 billion?
$114 billion.
This is not one single human being cannot be worth that much, surely. So hopefully he'll give me my poxy 300 quid back for a mistake, and make me not scared to try kind of researching AI stuff anymore. Yeah. Because that was a bummer.
That is a bummer. I don't like that. That's like my water bill.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I was thinking like at least because I might not have even looked at it again the next day. I might have left it on for a week. And
then you'd be bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, jeez, for something you can't even see. It doesn't send me any emails. Anyway, so that's fun. Tell me about meaning, Ivanka. Tell me what happened.
So we have mentioned meaning a few times on podcast. It is where our podcast was invented, after all. At the end of meaning, as everyone was leaving. It's a day-long conference in Brighton. It's been going for about 10 years because it's a business conference and it brings together lots of people. It's not necessarily digital. It's not necessarily digital transformation. It's not anything. It's about doing business in the world. So, and they are very good at gathering lots of different people together. And they leave enough time. So there's speakers and then there's a few workshops going on in parallel streams. This year I didn't make I was late. And B, I made no attempt to do any of the workshops because actually it's quite nice to sit somewhere and just be spoken at by people who are passionate about what they're talking about and just soak up some inspiration. So I do enjoy it, and I do recommend it to people. So do go along. It was yesterday. I'd say I enjoyed myself. I thought, we went. Well, I think the first year you and I went was a lot of it was really low, and we were like, I don't know if it was the sort of the energy was a bit like, oh, we're doomed. But yesterday, despite the first speaker being Claire Farrell of Extinction Rebellion, which was obviously very somber, shall we say, despite that, the people that came afterwards, and it's quite a classic meaning conference setup where, we start with the baseline bad news and then we talk about all the ways that it could or should be fixed. So that was the structure. I thought all the speakers were very good yesterday. I thought, we started with Extinction Rebellion. Claire Farrell introduced herself. She said her boyfriend says she's like the opposite of a stand-up comedian. So she apologised in advance for making everyone miserable. She did a clever thing in her talk. I thought at the end of the talk she said, because often at these things they go like, I'll give you 20 seconds to talk to your neighbour and tell them what you think meaning means. And at the end of her talk she said, well, I'd like to give you a minute or two to talk to the person next to you about, what you think you could do. And a minute or two later, everyone realised she'd just walked off stage to no applause, which was she'd just gone. It's like, I'm not here to get cheered. So I think that set it off appropriately for her message, which was, of course, that we're all fucked. It was just
we're all fucked unless, or just we're all fucked?
It's like, basically, we're all fucked. We need, things are not looking good. We are way not meeting our targets. We're not doing enough. We're not taking enough action. She talked about how Extinction Rebellion was formed. She talked about, the fact that it was, even though everyone goes, oh, digital connects everything, new social networks, but actually it started off the back of humans taking a small talk on the road, and then every time they gave the talk, which was delivered face to face, they'd leave a sign up sheet that literally had 3 tick boxes, which is are you prepared to protest? Are you prepared to get arrested? Are you prepared to do prison time? And those were the 3 check boxes. And then so when they'd gathered, I think she said it was about 60 talks, they gathered all this contact information. So when they came to launch Extinction Rebellion, they had a selection of contact details to start with. She talked about how, on the streets, especially in this most recent rebellion, it was more obvious that they were touching more different people in society. So an ex-policeman and a teacher and a doctor and it's no longer, maybe the first one was a bit, she didn't say this, but she was like, increasingly it covers all layers of society because it affects everybody. Especially now with the news of all the flooding that's happening in Yorkshire and Derbyshire, and the state of
Venice,
Venice, fires in Australia, fires in California. Like one of my friends, he sent me a picture of the fires. It's just from Australia. It's mind-blowing. So she was talking in this context. She was talking with in the context of, we've got very little time to act. We need each other. We need to approach all this with courage and an open heart. Otherwise we can't sort it out. She doesn't use words like sort it out. She uses words like, we're not going to be able to live in this new society that is going to inevitably evolve. She talked about the fact that one of the things that they also did, because she was knowing her audience, and it's a business conference, so she talked about essentially, without saying the words, minimum viable protest. So she talked about the experiments they kind of did before, how much effect you get if you occupy the Greenpeace office, because that's one of the first thing they did. They turned up at Greenpeace with some flowers and a cake and occupied their offices, because Greenpeace has been going for, it's been shouting for whatever it is, possibly more than 30 years, but there's no change. So that was one of the first places they they occupied. The protest they did to stop the new runway at Heathrow, which was a hunger strike. She talked about the fact that going on hunger strike for 2 weeks was one of the things that prompted her friends and family to, even though she's been talking about sustainability and the climate crisis for a long time, it was only when she went on hunger strike that her family were like, all right, now we're listening. And now we understand. So she talked about that. She talked about iterating protests, iterating their understanding. Like it was sparked
up those neurons of the audience. It sparked up,
I think, and I looked at a lot of the Twitter feedback was like people had been brought to tears. I feel like I'm more resilient these days. I'm more able to have these, hear this and not get all, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm having a strong moment, so I'm able to talk about these things without being all, oh my God, we're doomed. She showed some of the artwork. She talked about how they print, how the Extinction Rebellion symbol is owned by everybody and no one, and it needs to be protected, and nobody can print it on a T-shirt and charge money for it. It's for use by everybody, but not to anyone's commercial gain. So you can't print Extinction Rebellion badges and sell them, but you can make a stamp and print it on everybody you know's clothes, and that's cool. So it's that sort of. So she talked about a lot of elements like that. Perhaps I didn't, because I didn't feel like she told me anything that I didn't already know, because I follow it quite closely. So perhaps I'm like, I know all this, so I'm not telling you the story very well.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, something I did want to ask was, like, is like the getting arrested still kind of the core of that?
Yeah, I think.
Or, like, when you talk about, like, minimum viable protest, is the point still to get arrested? Like, is there any point doing, like, something? Does viable include getting arrested for it, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
I think there is, with all the, because they have this kind of academic background, they've done some research and reading, and I think the premise is still that flooding the legal system with people being arrested for non-violent protest is a viable way to disrupt society, because if all the judiciary and the police force are doing is dealing with people who are, get arrested for refusing to leave Waterloo Bridge, that's a lot of time and money that is going to be spent, and it has to then be addressed in some way. So I think that that's definitely part of the process, but that doesn't mean that you can't. It's still on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, and then just as a sort of slightly more boring, a bit like, what is the scale of Extinction Rebellion right now? Like, did she talk about the growth of it? Or
no, I don't know, because it's set up as like a self-organising thing, so there's some rules, and that's why, like, those protests where they blocked the tube, the underground in London, I don't know if you remember that, and there was very angry responses from commuters. That wasn't sanctioned. That wasn't a formally sanctioned protest, but and in fact it had been discussed and dismissed.
Right.
But like, if you have that sort of free self-organising, of course people are going to go off piece sometimes, but it is a risk. Somebody asked a question about it. It's like, yeah, it's a risk, but you're not going to not do it just because somebody goes off. There's a risk that some people might go a bit left field.
Is the idea that it is sort of organised centrally, or, like, I mean, how much? I guess I should probably look this up, but I guess they've got, like, here are the tenets of our rebellion, and you can go and do something as long as it's within these guidelines, and then what, like.
I guess so. I'm not really involved in the organising. I know that there are, like, city and neighbourhood chapters of people that get together. The Extinction Rebellion in my neighbourhood is obviously loud and clear. There's a couple of streets you walk down, every wheelie bin's got an Extinction Rebellion symbol on it. But I don't think. I think it's more like. It's not. I don't believe it to be centrally controlled. I think from the centre might come some, we've done some thinking about and we are going to go for an April rebellion. But the actual ins and outs, and I think they've set up frameworks and structures, sort of the scaffolding, as it were.
Well, I'm looking at the website and it says, our structure, we organise in small autonomous groups distributed around the world. These groups are connected in a complex web that is constantly evolving as we learn and grow. We are working to build a movement that is participatory, decentralised and inclusive. So it's like, it's loose, but it's still sort of like structured. It's not like anyone could just go, I'm doing Extinction Rebellion now. I'm I don't know, pushing this policeman over.
And there's some things like they have a central, like you can donate to a central fund that goes for, let's say I donated to the legal crowdfunder, but my local Extinction Rebellion also had something like 12 arrestees. And so I donated to my local Extinction Rebellion directly, because just because they're gathering money centrally doesn't mean there's going to be enough for everybody. And it could cost a person. I think somebody was telling me, if you go to magistrates court, people are more likely to be found guilty at the moment than if they go to proper grown-up court.
Right.
I don't think particularly highly of magistrates court. I'm sorry, but it costs about 600 quid. So you've got an out-of-pocket expense.
Right.
So if I can't be arrested, I'll give you some money to go towards, and you can. I'm happy. So there's different ways of helping, or different ways of participating that aren't just about getting arrested.
That's quite a direct way to donate to something, isn't it? Like, we'll pay your court fees.
I'll pay your court fees if you go and get arrested. I can't be arrested, but I can pay for court fees, or I can come and. I remember in the first rebellion, they were asking for people, because the Met Police were bringing people down to Brighton when they arrested them. And so then there was a bit of a call out, because I'm on the groups, I'm not, and they were like, can people volunteer to go and, you go and meet somebody who's just been released, like with a flask of coffee and just a bit of personal contact. Because a lot of people who are being arrested have never broken the law in their lives.
I'm just wondering what are the consequences of that long term? Like, you've got a criminal record now, and then does that automatically flag things for you in future? Is it going to cause you problems? I know that's probably why it's so powerful to do it. Yeah. But it's a pretty deep commitment to, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to get loans anymore,
I don't know what it prevents you. I think it's also about whether or not you get convicted.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think quite a number of people are being able to present a case for not being actually found guilty. Well, I certainly wouldn't recommend to many young people that they got arrested, but equally, like, if you, for example, having a criminal record does not necessarily prevent you from being a foster carer.
Right.
Because if you got arrested for, participating in the poll tax riots, it doesn't matter.
I'm thinking more about like automated systems of like recruitment agencies and things like that, where someone is just going to get like filtered out because of something really superficial that isn't going to be looking at why they got arrested. It's just going to go.
Your criminal record is not that publicly available.
Yeah, okay.
I know that because for a lot of these government contracts, you have to produce a document that proves gives your criminal record status. So it's something that you have to apply and pay to be printed. It's not open data. You definitely, if you have a criminal record, it's very unlikely you'll be going to America on holiday if that's been your lifelong dream.
Like that.
And you might not be able to work with children, or you might not be able to, in terms of getting a teaching job or something. But then So you're making a massive commitment on your own future, really. So it's something that I think is much easier. So, for example, in that last rebellion, a lot of old people were putting themselves forward to be arrested, like in their 80s, because, that sounds like a good way to protest your grandchildren's future.
Yeah. But tricky, isn't it? Yeah, like travel. That's the thing. Yeah, well, it's good. I think it's good to just spend a few minutes fleshing it out, adding some dimension to this thing.
One thing she did say that I think is worth saying, because it sort of came up a bit. I think there was a theme, an underlying theme that I wrote down at the end, and she talked about the fact that letting go of outcomes is really important. And Extinction Rebellion have never been like, we demand that we all have renewable energy. It's never been about solutions or about outcomes. The outcome is let's all survive, or as many of us as possible. She's like, the first rule of humanity is don't kill your children. You know, it's like so there is a common interest.
So, what else?
So, after Extinction Rebellion, after Claire Farrell, we had Miata Fanbule. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce her surname. And she spoke about the Green New Deal. She spoke
excellent.
very...
that's the other thing I was thinking about reading out, actually. But go on.
the Green New Deal stuff.
Yeah.
So she was obviously incredibly knowledgeable. She was speaking... So Extinction Rebellion is like, fuck the system, break the system, we need a new system, we need to survive. Somebody talking about the New Economics Foundation, talking about the Green New Deal, is talking about... She's talking to politics now. She's talking to bankers now, because we don't really have time to smash the whole system up and come up with a new one and come up with solutions. We need to start fixing things now, and then, you know, let's fix everything. Let's smash it all up. It's the same thing of the Dominic Cummings Brexit. Let's break the EU and then fix it. This is not... So she's taking a different view. She would have been very comfortable presenting in front of the World Bank, and she had that sort of persona of intellectual, well knowledgeable, well trained, and she'd got a detailed, prepared speech. So it's like she was presenting, whereas Claire Farrell was talking to us. It's a bit different. But we got it. But it was all... I was listening to it and relying on the video coming up, because it was like full of stats that were very useful. But she was very clear, like, there is no time to come up with a solution. You know, we've got Mark Carney telling business that there will be no business. The insurance industry, there's all this, we are at crunch point. So, and she's talking about this Green New Deal, in its simplest, it's just saying Thatcher closed all the coal mines and left all these communities just to flail.
Yeah.
They weren't provided with any new jobs. The Green New Deal, part of the Green New Deal is going, right, we need to stop extracting fossil fuels today. Those people need jobs. Let's get them focused on insulating everybody's homes. Let's get them focused on new industries that are going to help us, like building renewable energy plants, whatever is necessary. So it's kind of because one thing that she was very clear about is that you cannot address climate change without addressing inequality.
Yeah,
and she was absolutely citing the UN poverty report, all of those things of like, we can, and you and I talk about this all the time, but it's that we cannot separate out inequality from climate change solutions or climate crisis mitigations. I don't know, like, I think we're downgrading our potential futures, but it's like so she was very impressive, and I'm looking forward to listening. I think a transcript of her talk or being able to listen to her speech would actually be really useful, because it's full of nuggets of stats, of convincing arguments, of we don't have time to dick about, let's crack on. She would not have sworn ever.
I'm going to put this is a swearing. I'm trying to kind of keep the episodes swear free, but I think this one's going to be sweary.
I think this one's allowed to be swearing. And I'd like to follow up more on her separately. Like I added her to my Twitter, and Meaning gives you this handy booklet, so you actually when you want to eke out your research over time, it's all there.
Yeah,
So
just
that
a
was
quick
her.
admin thing. Like takes them quite a while for the videos to come out, doesn't it?
It does,
like it was a few, like maybe a month or two last time. So I would love to put the link in this episode, but it's not out yet. But maybe we should when they do come out, we should have I can have a look at them, and maybe we should just do a quick recap, 5 minutes, whatever, and then I can put the links in that one, when they do come through, and then all of our listeners can listen to these instead of maybe I'll put some of the highlights from last year as links into this one.
This I think one of the things I did write out about her, I wrote is we need change of a scale that we've never achieved in peacetime.
Right.
Which is, if we all shifted the mindset and understood ourselves to be, in a fight for our survival in a more war mode, then
isn't the ecological disaster isn't it a common enemy? Isn't that supposed to bring the human race together? Can't we stop spending all this money on arms and spend it on actually, sorting this stuff out? That would be good, wouldn't it?
It would be good. The next guy, I really enjoyed his talk because it was basically made up of quotes. His name was Brett Hennig, and he is from the Sortition Foundation.
Sortition?
Basically, so his whole thing was democracy is fucked. Same sort of thing you and I talk about, it needs to shift. And also, but he gave context and history to it. Because when the democratic process came together 2,000 years ago, it was about people who could afford to vote. So if you're a white man or a man who was paying your taxes, then you could vote. And then, so basically they talk about, so in an aristocratic system, an aristocrat makes a decision. But in democracy, it's just you're still giving a vote to a privileged few. In one form or another. So he maintains that that's the problem and what we need in order to come up with the right solution. He's the advocate of these citizens' assemblies. And the reason he calls himself the Sortition Foundation and not the Random Selection Foundation is that the word random has too many negative... Sortition basically means random selection.
Well, I just Googled it because I was like, sortition, beautician. But no, it's SORTITION. And in governance, sortition, also known as selection by lot, allotment or demarquee, is the selection of political officials as a random sample from a larger pool of candidates, a system intended to ensure that all competent and interested parties have an equal chance of holding public office. That's cool.
So then he talks, he takes us through history and a few people who are going... This is not, this isn't the right thing. We've just cut all the heads off the aristocrats post-French Revolution, but then it's given a different vote to a different privileged small crowd. But citizens' assemblies are a thing. They are not get a group of people into a room, everybody pro-immigration, anti-immigration. Yes, no, it's not it's set up much more as a, this is my impression and understanding of it from what I knew before and now. It's basically you get a bunch of people randomly selected in a room, but it's a structured and organised conversation which involves being informed as well. So you'll have groups of people that absolutely disagree, but the room is set up like any workshop or big workshop that you organise. There are things that you do to get everybody talking properly. And my understanding is, and I'm willing to believe this, that they will often come up. It's like the jury system. Juries are randomly selected, and juries tend to, I don't think there's many occasions when a jury gets it or I don't know if they get it right or wrong. I don't know. But I think there's an element of these citizens' assemblies about education. And I did walk up to a table of random people, and in fact, I think it was one of the guys was the guy that I saw doing a blockchain talk to maybe the first time I went.
Yeah.
So it was like, right, Twitter sample poll. If you don't know that the government spends more on pensions than on defence, should you be allowed to vote? Well, because if we do random selection, blah, 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 all sorts of people will be turning up. And I was like, but that's not it. It's like you would, if you were called for a citizens' assembly, you would go off to a place where you have experts come and talk to you. And then somebody else went, yes, but what constitutes an expert? I was like, I don't know. What I'm saying is somebody who clearly does and has studied this and looked into it has got some ideas, and I am not willing to throw them away. But
I just want to just say you're introducing a new concept, sortition, to me certainly, and then I think that will be an idea that you'll have heard this guy talking about. I thought, that seems like a better way to do it. I just was trying to spark that conversation about what you're then talking about, which is why this shit never happens, because the debate just immediately goes to this superficial first reaction, and then disingenuous responses, and then press spreading fear, having their agenda, and just that that nudge economics of it. It just seems like good new ideas have such a tough time.
Yeah. And there was a fourth woman at this little table that I stood at with my cup of coffee waiting for somebody I know to appear so I could walk away. And she was going, but in her impression was that in Ireland, before repealing the Eighth, they ran citizens' assemblies around the countries that even worked towards the definition, the wording of the question in the referendum.
Right.
So, you could have a citizens' assembly that first establishes what we mean by expert, if that is necessary.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
If that's your concern, people,
then we can do that.
Deal with that with this mechanism. It's really easy for people to go associate the term with something that they've had some superficial debunking of, and then they stop thinking about it, and that's a real problem.
And this woman she went, "What about focus groups?" I was like, "Focus groups people are not randomly selected." So
and also they're not really given any information. No.
And also,
what's your initial stupid reaction?
I don't even it's like in the same way that I spend a lot of time arguing why speaking to 5 people for an hour each is good data. I'm willing to accept that this person who clearly knows about these things has got some structures and tools and things to make them work. So I liked his talk.
Yeah.
It was nice and quick fire and quote. It was nice. Nice
and
style.
I will say, another reason that these sorts of ideas have a tough time is and that's in the UN Poverty Report, is people in government, ministers, these people that are in charge think there's not even a problem to be solved. This is how are you even going to get it on their plate without chopping their heads off? I do not know.
Then we had a fabulous woman called Jennifer Brandel, who came up with a thing called Hearken.
Hearken.
Hearken, as in, as Nick's mum often says to my daughter, hark at you.
Right.
So
not harken back to simpler, more racially defined times.
Listen. It's about listening.
Listening, okay.
She's a journalist, and she is. She talked about. There were 2 themes to what she spoke about. One was about making journalism to be something that serves its community rather than takes this parent-child approach where we tell you things and you have to accept them. It's more like in my society, so it's more of a service to society, not a parent to society. So in Chicago, she's a journalist in Chicago. So what they do is let citizens ask a question, and then the journalist would investigate and find the answer.
Right. So
it's kind of
I get it.
Inclusive, participatory news generation. I think there were 2 examples that stuck in my head One was a woman walking around Chicago. She had some good stories, but I'll go with two because I'm not telling you a whole talk. So two examples, because do you know what? I haven't got time. But one of them was somebody walking around Chicago noticing that all the water fountains were on all the time. So she wrote this question in, and then the journalist phoned up the Parks and Services or whatever they are, and they were told that the pipes are so full of lead that the water's really undrinkable. So they were trying to flush out the system by leaving the taps on all the time, which led to a whole bigger story about lead pipes in Chicago, blah, blah, blah. So, it's kind of a good, somebody who's in their city noticing things. And then another example was a bit jollier, which was some young lasses asking about how many dances originated in Chicago. And then it actually culminated, and there's quite a few apparently, and then it culminated in this like sort of festival-y day where lots of people got together in Chicago and showed each other's different dances, and it was cross-generational, and the sun shone and rainbows came out, and it was amazing. But it was a nice story. And so that was one element of what she spoke about. And then she spoke about, okay, this is working, and people keep asking me how I get this to work, and I've got this system, so I start a business. But then because I'm a sort of socially conscious business, a social enterprise, and I can't get to talk to the venture capitalist types, because also she's a woman, and in America it's provable that if you're a woman or a person of colour, you just don't get on there. They don't listen, they don't care.
Y Combinator ignores you.
Yes. So they talk about, like, we're not a charity, we're not a not-for-profit, we want to make a profit, but we also aren't a unicorn company that we expect somebody to be able to sell for $12 billion in 3 years. So they've coined this new thing, which is a zebra kind of company, which is like, we want to make money, we don't want to like eke all the hoard value from the world. We have an idea that is of benefit to society, and there was a couple of reasons. Zebras are black and white, they work in herds, and a group of zebras is called a dazzle, which is fortunate. So she had all this other... And she wrote some great stuff about... she's another one I'd like to follow up on. But she had some great stuff about how, they played... She and a few other women got together and wrote about... there was lots of plays on words about what venture capitalists expect in terms of like graphs going up and using, all that sort of aggressive masculine... So she was fun.
Restaurants Brighton a zebra company?
I think we kind of are, actually. And I did walk away from that because we've got quite a lot of things that we do without formal structures. So that I'm coming on to talk later about steward ownership, which has given me some new language, which I like. But yeah, I think we are. We're like, when none of us... The four of us that are involved, none of us have any interest in... People go, do you want to roll it out? Do you want to scale it? Do you want a different town? No. We're quite happy serving Brighton, which is our community that we live in, and we, make enough to live, and... that'll do us, thank you. But obviously we still need to continue to invest and keep it interesting and blah, blah. But we're not looking for investment. But, if you've got some investment, I'm always up for free money. But I can't promise you much. Free money. Exactly. Everybody wants free money. Anyway, so yes, that was good.
Also, you'd be pretty annoyed if you discovered that the metal you'd made all of your plumbing from turned out to be poisonous.
Rachel Lilly from Aberystwyth University is a behavioural insights researcher, but she does research into mindfulness, and the emerging thing is that I liked what she was talking about, is that mindfulness is presented as a way of coping with the misery of life, and in many ways is making us... they bring mindfulness into work in a stressy work environment in a way that essentially is blaming, it's you that's not being able to deal with it rather than us as shit. So it's like a way of putting therapy and blame onto the person instead of just making things better.
Yeah.
So, and her talk was a bit. I'm trying to think. So, and she also talked about how the systems that we have in our current democracy, like local councils and government and policy making, is all about presenting a position and then having to justify and defend it rather than collaborate to come up with the right solution. So she was talking about even the structure of council chambers is like, there's a panel of people and then the poor civil servant has to come in and go, please don't hate me, but I'd really like us to have a well-being thing. And then they're like, right, how much is that going to cost us? So it's all set up in a sort of a combative environment rather
positional
than
arguments. And this is exactly what I wanted to do the next episode about, which is that kind of how to have those negotiations and how to come to decisions without like starting from what I want to actually do, because that immediately like screws things up according to this book.
So I think hers was very, and I wrote a few bits about hers actually, but she also talked about that essentially we're learning loads more about the brain and how it works, and also about, like, in the last 10 or so years, 10, 20 years, we've kind of come up, there's been a step change in our understanding. But one of the things she talked about as well is that you can't really disassociate emotion from thinking. So, we talk often about objectivity and subjectivity, and actually you kind of are your emotions and your thinking is your emotions, and it's not as separatable as we all think, which is not a word. Separable, maybe? I don't know.
Separable. Yeah, that's a good one.
Then, so that's her. Then the next person was called Armin Steuernagel. Armin Steuernagel, something like that. Anyway, he's from Germany, obviously, and he was really good to listen to. He was like, I'm a capitalist. He's one of those, I'm a self-professed capitalist. I believe in private ownership. It's nice to own things. It's like your baby. I started my company when I was 16. He never talked about what he actually did, what his company produces or anything like that. But he talked about this new structure he came up with, and the fact that this, more than employee owned, it's steward ownership, and which includes an element that says, because there's some good historical examples, like John Lewis is an employee-owned organisation. You can't take your votes with you if you leave. You only have a vote while you work there, blah, blah, blah. And most employees have a vote. And there's some other examples like Bosch. Bosch is a steward-owned company. And a lot of he got, which surprised, just surprised. I hadn't really thought about it, but it made me, it kind of makes sense that like John Lewis is a quality company. Bosch is a quality company. It's like, if you don't just care about accruing wealth for shareholders, then you actually have a bit more freedom to do quality things. I think take a bit more pride in your product, in your structures. Anyway, the one element of this steward ownership was this need for some sort of foundation, or they call it the purpose. They have actually created this structure, this purpose foundation, that says there will be one share will always be held by this foundation. So you can, and its sole job is to veto any effort to sell the company.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Or to change its structure. So it's like, because whilst you have the bit that sort of like, so there's no concept of an exit strategy. What's your exit strategy? None of that shit. None of these unicorn companies. It's like, we're making a thing that's going to make jobs and make people happy in our community, and it's going to last forever. So these companies have very long lives, like 130 years, 100, like I think Bosch has been going for 120 years and has had 7 CEOs.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's like...
Can I interrupt with my own experience of that, which is when I talked to my uncle, who's sort of like marketing head of whatever in companies. I talked to him when I was starting my Good to Hear, and like talking about my happiness app and saying, look, I just want to do this for a while. And he's like, well, you've got to think about your exit strategy and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm not interested in that. I just want to like try and make a good product and like keep it going. And that, I want this to be what I do. And then like a few years goes by and I'm like, I kind of don't really want to work on that app anymore, but I've got no exit strategy. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think. It's like maybe you need because he was like you got to structure it so that you can like sell it off, and I was like that sounds like nonsense. And now I'm like I wish I could sell off a bit of this.
But I think you could sell off, but that's a product, not a company. Like you could sell
That's
your
true.
app to somebody. I don't think
suppose
there's any reason why not.
But I'm still trying to do this. I think this idea of like you only have a say while you're still working there has just got me thinking about. Okay, I want to do this. Everyone gets paid the same, but maybe we have a concept of like that you're currently actively working on the product is that when that happens. But if you then at some point we kind of talk to each other and say, okay, do you want to like not work on this anymore? That means you won't get this thing, so it's not like a share that you can just hold on to forever. No. So that's because that's something that's been playing on my mind about doing the equal pay. It's like, well, how does that work if people come and go? I'm not sure.
No.
But if you just said it's while they're there, then I think that's doable, and you can sort of define that even if it is quite loose and contractory.
So I rated him. He was good. Another one to follow up.
What's next?
What's next
on
is...
this merry-go-round of ideas that all seem like an awful lot of work and effort and scary. And like, where do you even start? How do you do any of this without not doing anything else for 5 years? God. I have no idea.
Then we had World Fair Trade Organization, not to be confused with the Fair Trade Stamp. Not that he was in any way dismissive of the fair trade stamp. He's just like, well, that's not us. Again, it's the nice thing about the Meaning Conference is that you will collect a lot of examples of different ways of doing business that don't destroy the earth. So World Fair Trade Organization, nice man with an Aussie accent.
Okay.
Talked about businesses. It was like, the guy last year who did the zeytin olive oil from Palestine.
Yeah.
It's basically lots of examples of businesses like that.
Right.
But he did talk about... I wrote it under his face, but I don't think it was him that was talking about it. Because in the dark, you open your book and you write down words and you're like, oh. Okay. But there was... Somebody said, stop being fatalistic. Mm-hmm. Like this idea... I think it might even have been a woman that talked about mindfulness. It's like, if you are going to accept things... basically you don't have to accept things, and as soon as you have any power you should use it, whatever your power is. So it's more that sort of act now, don't just be fatalistic in anything that you do. The next speaker was a woman called Sarah McKinley. I liked her very much. I found her to be very impressive, like the woman who spoke about the Green New Deal, Miata, but she was, but there was a slight difference in her talk, is that it was more personal. It was more from a position of her life, looking out, rather than presenting a solution or presenting like a convincing argument. So she was very convincing, and she was very angry. Like she was very serious. This is like a. This is unacceptable. This is, there was, children in supposedly the richest country in the world, which is the US. She was American as well. She was like, for anybody to be hungry, for anybody, it's just unacceptable. And she got the gravitas, but the humanity and the humility. I would work for her in a heartbeat. In fact, I'd like to be her when I grow up. So she was cool. And then a wonderful, warm human being called Agamemnon Otero. Agamemnon. He was all about community-owned green energy products, and he's like got loads of projects going in London where these different communities set up solar panels on their roof of their council estate, for example. And so it's like he's all about bringing together communities, and he was but the way he spoke was just so human. And he was like, guys, we're all great, and I know we're going for a tough time at the moment because we don't have any real good male role models, and we're all emotional and everything, but every single one of these projects is led by a female, by a matriarch. If you want a community greening project, you need a matriarch who will bring it all together, knows all the kids on the estate, knows everyone, knows who their mum is, knows what they're doing, knows who needs help, knows who's like, and that just makes it happen. And again, another one to follow up, because there's things you can invest in, like there's green bonds that he does, there's like all sorts of stuff. And he talked about when he goes to the finance industry and talk, because the finance industry came up a lot, came up with the steward ownership thing as well, which is interesting, but I can't tell you everything. And then he talked about it, which is like a reasonable return in a reasonable amount of time should be enough. So 4% in a reasonable amount of time is fine. Why do you have to be 3,600% return on your investment in like these unicorn terms is just ridiculous. So I quite liked his language as well. And he was lovely as a human.
And he gave you the badge?
No, he didn't.
Oh, we've got more?
We've got one more.
Okay.
No, we've got two more. We've got Paul Mason, being Paul Mason, talking about Marxism and the left needs to adjust. He talked about AI and humanity and humans and who gets to define what a human is, and DeepMind got switched on and then it got switched off and blah, blah. The thing about... and, like, there was three of us that hung out together a lot, and we all responded differently to different speakers. And Paul Mason, he reminded me that I probably don't think enough about AI. That's basically what I talked about. And then there was this weird, I need to look it up a bit as well, because there was this weird linguistic stuff that I've never really thought about. So it's like human race is a bad thing to say. You should say human species, and, the nice thing, the good thing about his, the basis for all these conversations, like we should be able to decide and define what is a good society, how happy, like what does a human in the good society look like, how do they behave, what do they have, and then from that the system should be in place to help us execute that.
That's my plan.
I know.
That's what I've been saying.
Many of us have excellent plans.
I've done anything on it.
Somebody's gonna get it through.
Yeah, good. I'm glad other people are pitching this.
Yes.
Maybe I can relax.
Or maybe you could help. Or let's send him a link to Blank State.
Yeah.
Then we had Math Potts as our final speaker. He has started a thing called the Camarados, and he was funny and engaging and spoke about himself. Maybe that's just me. I just want people to talk about themselves. Like, why are you talking about this thing? What makes you interested in this thing? So he talked about he'd run homeless shelters, and he said because he got us to do this exercise where, think about the first 10 years of your life, and then 10 to 18, and then the rest of your life. And then he was like, go back to your happiest day. It doesn't have to be the happiest day ever, but a happy day. What defines that happy day? Friends, and you're either doing something you love or you're with people you love. Yeah. And he said, in all the years of running homeless shelters, where I got people a job and a room, and I go, have you got a job? Yeah. Have you got a house? Yeah. I never ever asked them if they had a friend or a purpose, but I had got them a job in Asda. So of course they all came back, because without friends and purpose, we're human. We need to connect. Yeah. So he set up this thing called the Camarados, and you set up a public living room wherever you might set one up, and there are many of them now across the United Kingdom. And you can go and sit down. There's no staff and nobody's organising. You just go and sit down, and somebody might sit down next to you, and you might go. So, like, he gives example of the one in a hospital where, like a cardiac surgeon comes sit down and goes, I'm just having a really bad day. And someone goes, do you want a hug? And he goes, right, I'm ready now to go back to fixing people's hearts. And then somebody else sits down and they're like, they've just lost someone they love. So those are kind of extreme examples. But he's even got an example in a market town where people are where on market day they have this public living room the market traders like so much, they bought the organiser a marquee, so that not a marquee, a gazebo. So it was just lovely, and he's the one that gave us out these badges that said I'm a bit shit sometimes. It's like, because we all are a bit shit sometimes, and fair dues. So he was a great one to end on. He did make us all sing Waterloo by ABBA, which you would have
loved.
So you would have approached it with an open heart, and you would have relished every
head
second.
Voice, chest voice, mellow. I'd been doing harmonies.
So,
anyway.
But it was fun because the dome where Meaning is held is where ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo.
I just noticed today that my shorthand name for the product I've been working on is Euroviz, as in Eurorack visualizations, but I just noticed that it also sounds like Eurovision, so maybe I need to stop calling it that. Okay, is that Meaning?
That is Meaning.
Pretty much enough.
That is
if you want to see more, get a bloody ticket or watch the videos and we put them in.
Yeah,
Whichever
exactly.
comes first.
If you need more meaning in your life, watch the videos, sign up to newsletter, do all those sorts of things.
Yeah. And how are you feeling? How are you? And you said you're sort of feeling in a strong place, but what are the motivations this year?
I think so. The themes there were two themes. One was about doing things as humans we've all known how to do, have forgotten to do. There were lots of things about going back and remembering to talk to people, remembering to buy not remembering as in, but like going back to the behaviours. We've gone off in a direction, and it was an interesting journey. We've learned some things, but we've gone too far in that direction, both societally and in terms of human happiness and planet-wise. Like consuming, and like not talking to each other and living in little units and forgetting that we can babysit for each other's kids and help out and all these things. So we need to come back to a place where we remember that we need each other. All of us need each other. All of us need friends. All of us need other humans. All of us need somebody to sometimes give us a hug. There is definitely that element. And that's not necessarily... And I actually don't particularly care how hippie that sounds. But even going into your local coffee shop...
It does not sound hippie to me. And I think I'm sensitive to that.
Was it you saying, how do we get rid of cynicism? Or was it somebody else? Anyway, that's a different conversation, probably. But so just, and connecting doesn't just mean these going and sitting in a public living room and giving a stranger a hug. It also means going to your local shop. It means thinking about where your business is, who it employs, how that impacts on their lives, how many people are impacted when you close a business in a particular town or when you grow a business or you buy. So that was definitely one of the themes. And the other was that there are lots of ways of doing business that aren't just about wealth extraction and accumulation. And like extracting wealth, I think, is a phrase that I'm not sure I use enough. But a lot of businesses are set up as systems to extract wealth. Yeah.
I've been saying farm value is how I've been talking about it. But farming wealth from our attention, from our every single nook and cranny of our lives is being farmed and extracted and
it's like
pulled up into Jeff Bezos's,
$114 billion. I mean, if he gave away $113 billion, he would still be a billionaire.
Yeah.
He would still have more money than he could ever spend, ever. And probably should, and that could do so much good. The steward ownership thing, his examples were things like that search engine, Ecosia, the tree planting one. The guy who started that was offered $100 million.
Yeah.
And he declined the offer. So instead of signing a contract going, I'll have $100 million in my account, he signed a different contract which made it a steward-owned company. So everybody who works for Ecosia... Like, what a feeling to have had your boss go, no, I don't want $100 million. $100. I want to work with you guys. I want to build something amazing. And so I think that's a good story to end on.
Yes, good. Very good. That's what we would like. That's what I would like to do.
I'd like to do
as
that.
Well, I'd like to be offered the £100 million and say, Okay, thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. There's a subscribe button, or you can do it within the app in which you're listening. I think, probably, most likely. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter and increasingly doing the Grand Podcast Instagram.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com and youtube.com/user/Michael Forest if you want to see my videos, which I'm, keeping them coming. And, we also have a Patreon if you're fancy. If you just do want to help me, help us pay some... this isn't free to operate. If you want to help us out, that would be wonderful. There's a lot of content there now. It's all for free and no adverts even. So, Patreon, fancy guys. Why not? Why not? Why not don't be Jeff. Be someone cool. What else?
If you could write us any reviews, ratings, that kind of things, that helps people find us because we have to beat those algorithms. Also, tell a friend about it. Just now, a stranger in a bus stop. Hi, I'm listening to this great podcast. You should listen to it too. Or you might like it. Should listen to it. It's probably a bit too directive. Maybe you might like it. That might work better. People don't tend to like being told what to do. And that would be great if you did that. Marvellous.
Cool.
Thank you.
Excellent. Help feed the AI, feed the algorithms, get our podcast surfaced in people's feeds. Recommendations. All right. Thanks for listening anyway. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.